Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Todd and Taylor Show and another edition of Coffee and Comics. I'm Todd A.
I am Taylor Trask.
How are you doing, Taylor?
I'm just lovely. I guess we should tell our listeners we just finished recording another episode of the show, so we're doing a twofer on a Sunday morning. We got so excited we wanted to do two. So if you just listened to the one where I don't even want to say. Should we say what we reviewed? I guess do we?
Oh, sure.
So we were just reviewed Paper Girls
in our
and
last
I Hate
episode.
Fairy. Yeah, and so we're starting this one. So if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to that review, and then also listen to our first episode where we talk about Pyongyang and Rocket Girl.
We generally start these out talking about what coffee we're drinking. I'm still drinking the vanilla iced coffee that I got at Starbucks this morning. How about yourself? Did you refresh, or are you?
I am just about polishing off my Dunkin' Donuts small latte. So
excellent, man. Do you get a syrup in that? Do you have like a caramel latte or vanilla latte?
No.
Straight latte. Okay.
I go straight. The only time during the year where I ever entertain that, because it's basically once you start introducing syrup, it's more or less pudding, right? Pudding with caffeine. So the only time during the year where I do that is the pumpkin spice latte, which is now $9. So I can only do that like once or twice. Then I'm played out for the year.
Oh man. Yeah, I still have to put a little bit in. I don't do the full default syrup, but I do a couple of pumps of the vanilla. Anyway, that I did. I also had coffee cake I was going to have this morning, but I'm just not really feeling it at this point. I'm once again high from what we talked about in our last episode, and we stopped, and I immediately said, "Let's do the next one." I'm so excited to tell you what my pick is. You're going to be excited to hear it because we do not tell each other before this.
No, we do. We keep these secrets so that we can be surprised, just like you, the listener at home.
Yeah, we want to surprise each other. And this one was, and this is, we want to be surprised. And we've talked about, privately, how crazy would it be if we picked the same thing? Now, if I had picked the same thing we talked about in the last episode, I would have jumped in there. But what I did pick for this week is Little Marvel, A versus X by Skottie Young.
How about that? And Skottie Young, if you listen to our last episode, is the author and illustrator of I Hate Fairyland. So this is the Skottie Young twofer today.
Yeah, and I wavered on whether to do this one or like another, like a serious comic, because as we've been styling these episodes as Coffee and Comics, in our very first one I did like a fun time traveling action one called Rocket Girl, and Taylor did the very serious travel log Pyongyang, and then in the last episode I did Paper Girls, which is in between a more serious sci-fi, but still a fun sci-fi thing. And Taylor went the other direction and did the very silly and fun I Hate Fairyland. So I felt yesterday as I was picking out what to talk about, I thought I got to pick something real serious so that I can be the one with like gravitas for once. But no, I decided to talk about Little Marvel, which if you don't know, Skottie Young, I think primarily, but definitely with some other collaborators, artists and writers, did a series of Marvel comics with the Marvel characters, specifically the X-Men and the Avengers, where they're just drawn in his silly style, his cartoony style, where they look like little kids. And when this came out, when the individual issues of this came out, I actually picked one up. I think I was at that time traveling to see my niece and nephew, and thought, this will be a fun thing to bring with me and like read to my niece and show her the pictures because it'll translate. It's like little kids that are dressed like Spider-Man and stuff. And so I'd already seen this before I grabbed the trade, and I would never ordinarily think of grabbing the trade. It's not like a story that you gotta get into or something, or that I needed resolved because of the one issue I'd gotten. It was simply for the same reason. I thought, this will be fun. I'll take it to my, my niece again, and I'll have like a little comic book I can read with her. I think when it came out, I definitely viewed it with a heavy side eye, however we want to say that, like a really great side eye, because DC had done a great series called Lil Gotham, which I know Dustin Nguyen was the artist on it. and he may have actually been the writer as well. I am sorry that I don't know that. Oh, there were two creators on that. Derek Friedolfs is the other one, and I'm not sure if he was a writer or just a creator. And anyway, the Little Gotham stories I actually really love. I love Dustin Nguyen's art anyway, and it's greatly watercolor art. And what he did was he just kind of compacted the Batman characters, the whole Gotham, the rogues gallery and all the heroes. So they look kind of kid-like, but they're not kids. And one of the very cool things about Little Gotham Volume 1, which I believe was told through separate issues, was that each chapter was sort of a different holiday. So you got this Volume 1 that kind of went through the year of like, hey, here's the Bat family at Thanksgiving, and here they are at Christmas, and here's Valentine's Day. There were all these fun little riffs on the holidays that were really actually great to share with kids. Because I got that from my niece, and I would read those stories to her, and I would make up a lot of the dialogue, just to make it kind of sillier and stuff. But the pictures were always like kind of the Bat family having Thanksgiving. It was very kid focused, even though the characters were basically exactly where they are in age. Batman was an adult, and Robin was a child, and Nightwing was a young adult, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In Little Marvel, which I believe has also been retitled Young Marvel, probably so it doesn't draw total comparisons, they're definitely kids. So they've got the X-Men and the Avengers as kids. And the irony there is that it's like they're drawn in this cartoonish way as kids, and they're sort of in like kid battles, like if kids had all these superpowers and they're getting in fights in their treehouse and stuff. So it's kind of fun in that way. But the writing is pretty much not translatable to children. Like if I sit down with my niece and nephew with this, I'm going to have to explain things, like not just sort of make up dialogue and kind of gloss over bits, but like I would just have to, there's gonna be so many questions. Like, why is he mad at him? Why are they in this web? What's going on? It's like, it just doesn't really, it's not a story told for kids. It's a story for adults who already know these characters and want to see them kind of made fun of in a way that's in this style of art. So on one hand, it's like it's a fun read. It's fun to pick up if you like the art of Skottie Young. It's pretty fun, but I do feel, having gone through it as a volume, like I'll give this to the kids, but it's not going to have the same resonance. Did
he write it as well, or did he just illustrate?
He did write. So in this episode, and it's in this trade paperback, I should say. Even though I've looked at the the credits and the sort of fine print on the first page, it looks like they've only compiled 2 different sets of comics. But when you read it, it's really 3 stories. There's one story about the X-Men and the Avengers basically fighting on the city streets of this neighborhood. A lot of it circles around food trucks, food vendors, like them sort of selling different kinds of food. Iceman sells ice cream, and Captain America only sells hot dogs at his little street vendor cart, and Thor has like brontosaurus ribs or something. And they get in these little just fights, and Iron Man sells everything, and he has this like super high tech food truck that can make anything you want. So they just sort of ruin each other's day. Storm makes it rain on Iron Man's truck, and Hulk eats all the hamburgers and that kind of thing. And then the next story is about these 2 twins that appear to have superpowers, and how the X-Men kids and the Avenger kids are sort of trying to recruit them to their separate treehouse. Their headquarters are in different treehouses. And
I want to read this so bad. I'm Googling while you talk about it. I'm like, this sounds so fun.
So that's kind of where the weird explanations come in, is because obviously the creators of this know the universe so well that it's more so than just being in jokes for adults. Like, we've all seen those kids movies that have great lines just for the adults to enjoy. This is one of those where it kind of crosses it, like, man, that's like a big point, and now it's going to be hard to explain that to a kid. Like, why is Wolverine in both the Avengers treehouse and the X-Men treehouse? Because he's been on both.
I love that.
More than just like that's a joke for adults.
Yeah.
Spider-Man shows up in the Avengers thing, and they're like, "Hey, wait, you're an Avenger?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're pretty loose with the guest list around here." So so that's those two stories, the kind of the little food vendor story, fight in the neighborhood, and the trying to lure the twins to their team. Those are just kind of fun stories as I'm describing them to you. And then the weird thing is, like, the third story in this book was apparently from some series of issues called the A babies versus the X babies, and it's like literal babies. And I don't think Skottie did the art on that one, or at least not all of it. Someone else is credited. So it kind of looks like they've taken Skottie's style and made it more childlike. And that one just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like if you have a like kid Wolverine or a kid Captain America or something, those are kind of fun concepts. But a baby Captain America that has some issue with like baby X-Men. I mean, it was like they literally starts out in a crib, and I'm going, this is really dumb.
Wow. I mean, let me ask you this. How much of this leans into sort of, we were young enough when Muppet Babies, but more probably specifically Tiny Toons came out. Does this kind of feel like it leans into sort of like a lot of what Tiny Toons may have done, if you remember that far back, or is that a reference point?
That's actually a great reference point. And I'm old enough that Muppet Babies is probably the analog for me, but but Muppet Babies, that was, for real tiny children. But Tiny Toons was one of those things where I think you could enjoy it as an adult.
Yeah.
And as the kid at that age, I think we were probably at the age where we already knew we were maybe a little too old for it, but it had jokes back to cartoons that were, before our generation. So we sort of like got, I don't know, there was just a fun back and forth there. So I do think that's a good reference point, because I think you can read it as an adult if you just like Skottie Young's art and go, oh, this is fun to look at and fun to get these sort of jokes between the X-Men and Avengers. And it's no real big deal if you skip that third story where they're babies. Like, it's not, none of this is obviously like, it's not canon or anything. You don't, you're not going to care about it going on. I was actually surprised to learn that I think there's another volume of this, which is, I didn't know about this at all until this morning when I Googled it, where there's another Young Marvel called Little X-Men, Little Avengers, Big Trouble. So, and it's weird to say that I'm actually curious about that now. Like, what's happening in that one? And I might end up picking it up. I might, especially based on your review in the last episode of I Hate Fairyland. I kind of want to see what Skottie Young's been up to when he's poking around with canon characters like the X-Men and the Avengers.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll give another, not to make this like a twofer, but one of the reasons I got interested in actually I didn't track down this TPB at all. Like, I just walked past it on a shelf and went, oh wow, they collected that, and bought it. It wasn't like I was looking for it or anything like that. It just caught my eye and I grabbed it. But one of the reasons it caught my eye was because a few months earlier, it actually bought an adult coloring book, which was the Young Marvel characters drawn by Skottie Young. And I thought that was super fun. I mean, it's hard to say that was an adult coloring book, but it was in the coloring book section of comic book stores, which, we all probably know that's what they have now, or like these adult comic books where it's just the inks of a comic book and, for you to color in. So, and our friend Drew Huddleston also had that. He and I have discovered over Instagram that we both have that coloring book because we've shared separate images from it. And they're, those are that's really fun. Like it's the heroes of the Marvel universe depicted in this sort of squished, childlike version in these big action poses with some comedy mixed in. And so,
I'm looking at though, it looks like Skottie Young's art works perfectly for this. Like, I'm flipping through different pages and stuff, and it's like, oh, this. And especially having now experienced him in I Hate Fairyland, like I'm even more jazzed to check this out. Yeah,
it is funny, and I just with the one caveat I have that I described, which is to me, Lil Gotham stories work better for kids because they are oriented around that, like around holidays or around the Batman family truly being a family. Like when you think of that, like, oh, it's it's Batgirl and Batwoman and Nightwing and Robin and Batman all sitting down to a dinner or something. Like those are stories you can share with kids. It's not just this sort of made up conflict, the Avengers versus X-Men, which is a tie-in to it's not really a tie-in, but it's a reference to the Avengers versus X-Men comic book series, which of course kids would have no idea like why that's even happening. Yeah. But the strange thing is that the Little Gotham art, where it's so heavily watercolor, and it's been several years since I read that to my niece, so she was much younger, probably like between 4 and 5 years old when I went through Little Gotham. And I don't think her eyes sort of processed the watercolor in the like the Young Marvel, Little Marvel stuff is much more cartoony, and it's round, and the colors are filled in, like completely on a uniform or something. Whereas Dustin Nguyen's watercolor in Little Gotham, there's sort of streaks in it, and it's not all just like a block of color. It just doesn't. They don't read that symbolism the same way. So it's just sort of ironic to me that one's written for kids and drawn for adults, and the other one's, drawn for kids and written for adults. But
interesting.
But I think you can have fun with both of them. So I didn't mean to make that a 2 for a 3 for now, but that was my pick. Little Marvel AVX. What about you?
This week I went kind of in a more sort of stoic direction, I guess. Strangely,
of course.
I don't know if this is, you're going to hear it though, and be like, that's not stoic at all. It is a drawn and quarterly pick, because as we both love Image, I think we both also equally love drawn and quarterly. And I have such a sort of a wide selection in my library to choose from them that I feel, I wanted to dive in. And it's the book Wilson by Daniel Clowes. And this is one of those books where I'd always kind of seen it, but didn't really pay it much mind until the movie came out earlier this year starring Woody Harrelson. And they opened the trailer with like, based on the graphic novel or the acclaimed graphic novel. So immediately I'm like, ooh, I have to check that out. And the trailer is, really funny and interesting. And it kind of gives you a glimpse of it. So I went and bought the hardcover, and I freaking love this book. It's going to be a little tricky to review in the traditional sense because it's not, while it is there's a story arc start to finish, it's a lot more like Garfield or Charlie Brown, where there are, each page is like a sequence, a 6 or 7 panel sequence. And that sequence is a glimpse into the life of Wilson. And then the next page is a different sequence. So it's not like it's, 25 consecutive panels that just run together. Although each sequence or each page, back to back over the course of the book equal a greater story, but you're always seeing a different point. It's linear time, but you're always seeing a different point in that place. So in like one sequence, he might be talking to some neighbor, and then the next sequence he's at a restaurant, and then they go on, and then like at some point like the neighbor walks by him again like later on. So you would determine that it's a different time. The other thing that's interesting is that each page or each sequence is illustrated completely differently with a different style. So one might be hyper realistic, one might be more black and white, one might be more very simple Garfield-like lines. One might be, a lot more sort of like what you'd find in the 70s, or is more watercolor, or is more just like stenciling. So it's really cool, like for someone like me who really appreciates art and just what comics can do, to see page by page that evolution. And some drawing styles, repeat eventually, but they're never back to back. So Daniel Clowes, just seeing what he's capable of as an artist was really interesting. And the fact that he wrote it, obviously, too, is a huge help. We talked a little bit about that with I Hate Fairyland and Skottie Young. I think that with the way he does the art, it does, as you go through. At first, I thought it was maybe random, but the art style does lend itself to the sequence of the panels in any given page. I think, if you were to replay some of these panels with a different art style, it wouldn't work as well. So the stuff, maybe the more mundane aspects of Wilson's life are drawn more like Charlie Brown, where it's just very, grass and a sky as the background, and then like the characters interacting, and it's very, very one-dimensional. Maybe stuff that's a little bit more heightened or a little bit more surreal has a different artistic bend. Or if he's more depressed, the sky is grayer, or like his lines are a little thicker or darker. So you get to kind of see him isolated from the world. There's this one drawing style, and I'm actually looking at page 16 and 17 if you want to play at home. where the panel on the left is called Still Alive, and the panel on the right is called Fat Chicks. And it's like the panel on the left, or the sequence on the left, it's very, a lot of lines, a lot of detail on, him, as an actual, like he's drawn like an actual like human person. On the right side, his nose is exaggerated. Like everything is exaggerated. And it's, he sees a heavier set woman walk by, and he literally says, "I'll never understand it. Why do guys hate fat chicks so much?" And he's talking about, he's basically paying her a backhanded compliment. She's not standing by him, but he's going on. And I feel like by exaggerating his nose and his like features and stuff, it just makes his dialogue in this case more interesting. Like there's another level or another layer. I realized I should probably kind of read the description, because people are like, "Wait, fat chicks, what?" The description on the back is Wilson is a big-hearted slob, a lonesome bachelor, a devoted father and husband, an idiot, a sociopath, a delusional, blowhard, a delicate flower, and 100% Wilson-esque. And it's basically this guy named Wilson who's like just this complete like narcissistic kind of like just total mess. He's probably he's definitely on the spectrum. I mean, like he'll walk up to people and just like start having these conversations, or like he'll be walking his dog, right? And like, there's one of my favorite ones is called Cute Dog, and he's like walking his dog, whistling. A woman walks by and she's like, "What a cute dog!" Then a guy walks by. He's like, "Oh, cute dog." Next panel, "Hi, cutie." Then there's another panel where a guy just walks by, and then it shows Wilson in the final panel, like looking back at that guy, going, "Fucking asshole," just because like he didn't say anything about his dog, right? Like and then there's like another one where he, there's a lot of stuff going on with his dog. They use that as a device, but he's at an airport, and he just, he looks over, kind of worst nightmare for most of us. We're sitting there just minding our own business, and he just looks over. He's all kind of disheveled, and he just goes, "What's your line of work, brother? What do you do?" And the guy's like, "Excuse me?" And he just all of a sudden starts having this conversation with this guy who doesn't want it at all. And he just like waxes on about his ideas about the world, or just like his position on the world. And so it's like, it's really interesting. Like you get a sense of that if you watch the Woody Harrelson trailer. A lot of that humor is baked into that movie. I've seen the movie since that came out, and I will say the book is way better. Not that the movie isn't, but I feel like the book can jump around. Like it's really hard to tell a completely linear story with this character. Like it gets it's too much. You need to have it broken up by times, and you need to feel like the best jokes work where they can like deliver the joke, move on to the next one. And it's very much the way this book works. You could easily see this as being like a collection of newspaper strips from the past like 15 years. Because each one is so self-contained that it would fit nicely on like the funny pages of a newspaper. But it was they're all drawn and written for a book, but it's very much like it has like a kind of an anthology collection kind of feel, while there's the bigger storyline at play is after you kind of get a sense of Wilson as a character in his world, he sees his ex-wife, who he was divorced a long time ago, and finds out that they had a kid together that she put up for adoption. So the two of them, he kind of solicits her into his adventure to go find their daughter. And he desperately wants like this family now. He's in his like late 40s. He's kind of like, he's trying to make up for stuff. So he wants his family, and the wife really doesn't want anything to do with it. The daughter certainly doesn't want anything to do with it. So it's kind of like you get to see that kind of adventure. And while he's trying to like, have this happy family, and these other two people are like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? So there's like, at one point he goes to prison. So you get to see him like, how he acts in prison, and like how everybody, other prisoners can deal with or not deal with his nonsense. And just kind of goes along like that. It's really fun.
Is there is there a story to the whole thing? Like when you read it, front to back, is there a narrative there? Yeah,
basically the story of him finding his ex-wife, trying to build a relationship with her, and then finding his daughter, and then everything that happens after that. That is a story. Even though it's chopped up into little sequences and that are scattered over time, the time doesn't jump around. So you can at least that like the events you're reading now came after the events you just read.
Gotcha.
So it's sequential in that way, but it's not like linear start to finish. It's like, you might see him on a Tuesday having some conversation with a person, and then the very next page it jumps to like Saturday when he's walking his dog, or like, stuff happening in between, which is funny because especially when he meets his wife and kid, there's a lot of stuff like in the cracks that they don't talk about that they'll reference, and you're like, oh, what happened, I wonder. You know, like you kind of get a sense that like something happened off screen, quote unquote, that was like really interesting or funny. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. But I don't know, just the fact that every sequence is drawn differently. And then he uses that. It's just, I mean, that alone is, even if it wasn't that interesting to read, which it is, I would have bought it just for that, you know, that effort. But like the fact that it's really, it's jam packed with good stuff, and the jokes are just really funny, really fun character stuff.
On the Drawn and Quarterly website, drawnandquarterly.com/Wilson, they actually have an excerpt, which is the first 16 pages, it looks like. So you can really get, I got a feel instantly of like how it bounces back and forth between those styles. Is there a theme that develops through the whole thing, that the sort of more quote unquote serious art style is depicting like a real event versus, I guess the way I would interpret it is like it looks like page 2 or something, or page 8 that I'm looking at, which is, he almost looks like a Mr. Magoo character.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, is that really just like internal dialogue? Did that not even happen, or internal monologue? You know, like, is there a feeling like the realistic panels happened and the non-realistic?
No, it all happened. I mean, as far as I can tell, it all happened. But I think like the more realistic stuff tends to, like, for example, I'm looking at the one called Oakland, which I think is the page you were talking about. And he's like, you know, he very much is very simple. What kind of line drawings? Actually, there are panels that are drawn even more simply than this. But this is him just kind of wandering around the street, thinking to himself. And then the next one's called Mother, and it's much more like he's silhouetted, and it's much more he's very much drawn, you know, in accurate proportions. But it's a very dark, moody, palette. And like that whole panel is about him thinking about when his mom passed away. So it's, you know, and it's, nothing is ever too serious, right? So like, even though he gets into some meaty things, they'll never miss a turn to like just make him either be an asshole or really humanize him. I'll tell you what it really reminds me of. If you're like, what's the humor like? Like, if you could think of something. Did you ever see that somebody had photoshopped online Garfield without Garfield? So it's basically just all the John stuff.
Having an existential crisis all the time. Yeah.
This is so much like that, where you're just like, it's Wilson. A lot of it's just him wandering around or in bed thinking to himself, like literally having an existential crisis, just like going through all these like narcissistic, just like kind of just fears and everything. It really reminds me. In fact, if you go read this and then go back and read Garfield without Garfield, there's a lot. These two guys could be brothers, you know, they could be best friends. It has that sort of vibe to it. So it's almost like Daniel Clowes saw that and went, ooh, I'm going to build a whole concept around that idea of just this sad man sort of like trying to make sense of the world. But he has a lot of heart too. Like you don't hate him by the end, but he's just a very, you know, it came out in 2010. And I feel like after reading it in 2017, it's still probably even more so captures modern and urban life and just sort of the existentialism that a lot of people feel living in a city, like not knowing what to do with their lives. And then, you know, feeling like they're incomplete, feeling like they haven't, you know, really having a tried and true midlife crisis. And this is very much that. You get to see a guy kind of experience that at all edges of that spectrum. And so it's really kind of cool. And I feel like as I get older, you know, as I get closer to 50, this book might be more and more relevant to me, or I might pull it out more or feel differently about it.
Interesting. It does it. I mean, not to harp on the movie too much, but I'm just curious of how they pulled off. You know, is there anything in the movie that showed those, that attempted visually to show the changes in the drawing style that the comic book has?
No, not at all. It's very much a single palette all the way through. So again, there's a lot, and it was a good try. Like casting Woody Harrelson worked really well. It wouldn't have been my first. I mean, I love Woody Harrelson, but I think there's a couple other actors who may have nailed this a little bit more. But he did fine. Laura Linney was who they cast as his wife, and was it Laura Linney? Yeah. No, Laura Dern. I'm sorry, Laura Dern. And she's great too, but if you look at the character in the book, very different. You know, the character in the book, his ex-wife, is heavy set, and she's very plain and just very like sort of just, you know, she's working this kind of dead end job, and just, you know, he tries to sort of recruit her into his shenanigans and stuff. And Laura Dern's Laura Dern. So she's, you know, she's always gonna be pretty, and, you know, just, even if they try to, you know, haggard her up a little bit, she's still gonna be Laura Dern, right? So it's like you can't really get past that. And I felt like Wilson as an indie film, I think would have worked a lot better had they cast been completely unknown. So you didn't know anybody there. And I think if they had maybe split it up into 3 or 4 chapters like Tarantino style, where maybe each chapter was filmed a little differently or had a different, maybe you give it to 4 different directors and have 4 different directors. I mean, like almost like what's that one where Tarantino?
4 Rooms.
4 Rooms. Yeah. So almost like, I think you set Wilson in a 4 Room style movie verse and have it completely as unknown actors. I think that could have worked incredibly well.
Right. Almost tell it like in vignettes, sort of like to sort of pay tribute to the comic, but it is strange that they would just looking at the art. You can tell like how it just each page is mostly a 6-panel comic. It's really strange for me to try to figure out how they even turn that into a Woody Harrelson movie.
But think about this, like each, the art is there for a story purpose, but I also think the art it changes largely to give us that sense of, the world doesn't always look the same to you as you go through it. Like some days you're sad and the world looks differently. And some days you feel differently about yourself or the way you feel about, just things that are going on around you. So the art changes to reflect that he's not always, the world doesn't always look this way and feel this way as he's thinking. Like he's going through it and it changes, it evolves. Sometimes it's simpler and more fun and bright. And sometimes it's, heavy and sad and moody or, opaque and in between. Like, I really feel like the art does more to sort of suggest as you're going through the stage of your life, it's not always, it's there's ups and downs. It changes, the emotional spectrum changes. So I appreciate that fact. A movie or a filmed version of this, I don't think is ever going to deliver on that as well as a graphic novel can. The other thing that I like about the graphic novel version is the jokes, like the jokes, especially you can do it and then you get out of it and you're on to the next one. Like you don't have to linger. And in a movie, there's too many moments where like either they didn't transition the scene fast enough or they just couldn't. And you're kind of left hanging on this like joke. And it's like, the scene needs to change immediately for that to have the same punch or the same sort of, oh my God, humor. Like they got, so it's tricky. I don't envy anybody trying to adapt this, but I feel like, if you want to go see the trailer, if you're curious at all, go see the movie trailer, get a sense of kind of the character, but then know that the book executes that on a much higher level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is so wonderfully said about how the art reflects that character's perspective at that stage in his life and how each day may look different. I mean, I can't, we should have just closed the book right on that statement because that was wonderfully said. And I mean, just flipping through these pages, I'm in kind of thing. I heard Clowes get interviewed about this back when it was released. And it was funny to hear you describe it and for me to actually look at the sample pages versus what I only remember from that interview. Whereas he was trying to explain the different styles and the fact that like one strip might look like a Dagwood strip and one might look like, like a comic book style. And I came away from his interview with a total misapprehension of what this thing looked like. So hearing you talk about it and describe it in those terms is really helpful and really gets me into it. Yeah. Man, once again, you've picked a great, serious adult book when I pick a very silly one.
You know what, though? You need all flavors. Like if we just did we would sound a little too pretentious if all we did was like, now a book about the Alaskan fishing festival that happens once every 10 years. It's like those things are interesting, but like I think the best part about our tastes is that they really do run the full gamut of what's possible. And you need the funny stuff, you need the serious stuff, you need the in-between kind of like this. You need like people really, doing things with the art form. I was telling my fiance the other day, it's like I think people forget, especially like the casual comic reader forgets, the last 7-ish years of American comics, what I consider maybe the golden age in terms of creativity and really pushing the art form forward. Japan went through this long ago. So Japan and all their manga has been at this for a while. We're just now really figuring out what this art form can do. And I can't wait to see another 10 to 20 years, like where we are with it, like how we've evolved compared to where Japan's evolved with just how manga has gotten so sharp and so interesting. They haven't been afraid to really push the boundaries. That's what I like about what we're doing in the show is like each week now, I hope people go, oh my God, I didn't realize. Oh, I didn't realize. And they really like, you know, expose people to stuff that they would never have thought of walking into a store.
Yeah. And I think, you know, from my perspective, it used to be like there were alternative comics, which gave you nothing of the things that you got in superhero comics. And then there were superhero comics, and that was kind of it. And there was this huge gulf in between them. And yeah, what I've experienced over the past, like you said, like 7-10 years or whatever, is that gulf is getting more narrow, and we're able to get things like Wilson that aren't totally alternative. Like that, this is a, you know, book you could give to anyone and they would understand what it is about. They might not totally like it, but it's not going to be something, you know, just totally weird and off the wall. Yeah. I think we're doing well. Way to go, us.
Excellent. Well, folks can find more of us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Pocket Casts. Just search for the Todd and Taylor Show and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends. Help us spread the word. And if you like Coffee and Comics, you know, leave a review, tell your friends, share it on social media. You can also find us. We are Find Us There, all one word, all lowercase, on Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud. And of course, findusthere.org. That's where you can find all our shows, past episodes, and other fun stuff from us.
Great. Thank you again, Taylor. And I will catch you next week, and we will catch all of you listeners for another episode of Coffee and Comics.
See ya.